Returning now to the tensions on the Korean peninsula over the last 24 hours, where an attack yesterday by Pyongyang on a South Korean island has left 2 South Korean Marines dead. Mac Williams was Australia's ambassador to South Korea in the 1990s, and he joins us now in the studio. First of all, Mac Williams, your view on what occurred yesterday. It's hard to know for sure who fired the first shot, who to believe, who provoked who first into firing the first shot. What's your reading?
Well, I think one of the first things that you have to realise when you're talking about anything that happens in that Korean peninsula is that you need time to sort it out. People who rush into combat too early often get burnt by it. It would seem that the South Koreans were undertaking a regular manoeuvre, which was not firing necessarily into territorial waters, but that the North Koreans have jumped on that opportunity. But if you track back over the last couple of months, they've been warning the South Koreans to resist getting too active in those very key areas. The South Koreans, all they could do after the submarine attack on the naval ship earlier in the year was to suggest that they'd be more active in those areas. And the response from the North was, you do, and watch it. And
given the pattern of behaviour from North Korea over the decades, was what happened yesterday a surprise to Seoul or Washington?
I think yes, although you never rule out. One of the great things with North Korea is that they're predictably unpredictable.
We have heard a lot about the North Korean leadership being reclusive, being nuts. Just how unstable is the leadership? Should we believe it when we're told that these people are not logical?
They're certainly not crazy. If anything, Kim Jong-il is a magnificent poker player. He's been able to parlay the nuclear facilities in North Korea so many times into the game of poker with the US and with the South Koreans. But it is a period of incredible flux. We now have a 27-year-old successor on the power who's just been promoted to general. Well, the North Korean military is the most gerontocratic regime in the world. They've got 70-year-old generals coming out their ears. So, yeah, the general expectation, and it can only be that, is that this guy is so young that he's going to have to be controlled by the military and the party, but the military is even more important than KPA.
Is the potential point of weakness when Kim Jong-il dies? We know he's been unwell for a number of years. Is that why we're seeing an escalation? This is an attack as the best mode of defence in that period?
Look, that's one of the reasons possible among the speculation of it. Certainly, if you put the composite together of all the issues, that's one of the issues which would suggest that. But then he's been to China recently, and the word from the Chinese, one sees from various Chinese reports, is that they've told him fairly clearly that they want him to be very careful about what he does. And this time he seems to have thumbed his nose at them. So I think it's time to reflect a bit yet before we see what happens. But the real issue that's left is the military option's not possible without massive conflagration. The main issue now is whether the Americans will agree to talk bilaterally to the North Koreans. And one of my old colleagues, former counterpart ambassador in Seoul, Steve Bosworth, is actually in Beijing at the moment, trying to get to Pyongyang, or was going to Pyongyang, to talk to them just about that. The first signs out of the White House and others suggest that they're pulling the shutters down on the likelihood of bilateral talks. Jimmy Carter's now weighed in, having been up there in August, and Jimmy Carter regularly visits North Korea and has some sort of association with them. He's come to the view that the US really has to find a diplomatic way to get back into those talks bilaterally, which carry with it severe repercussions, particularly for the South Koreans, who feel that they'll get left out at the table, and they need to be at the table. So one can see some edge in the relationship between South Korea and the US coming out of this, which is maybe one of the reasons why the North Koreans have actually done this.
Okay. Well, Mac, stay with us, because here's an issue that affects a lot of people right now, not just making it easy to travel, this rising Australian dollar up in that parity point against the greenback, but apparently it's been great for bargain hunting shopping. You don't even have to go to Asia or the United States to get yourself a bargain these days. You can simply do it all online. This hasn't necessarily been good for local retailers, left struggling to compete. Businessman Gerry Harvey, who's probably down to his last couple of billion by now, has led the push for a tax on more goods that are bought online. Currently, if it's under $1,000, you don't pay GST. The Assistant Treasurer Bill Shorten, though, has been playing down that GST prospect today.
If you bring something in from overseas, if you buy something which is less than $1,000 from overseas, you don't pay GST. And there's a lot of people who are doing online shopping that way. That's their call. What some of the retailers are saying is, well, with the high dollar and all of this is undermining the shops in Australia. It's not clear-cut what to do. Certainly there is no policy proposition about a GST on online.
Tom Switzer, to you first on this. Are we being unfair on the likes of Gerry Harvey here? Do they have a valid point? It is so easy to buy things overseas these days. Should they be tax exempt?
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly true that retailers are doing it tough with the high Aussie dollar. There's no question about that. But I think the drift to online shopping is a good thing. It's a good thing for consumers, it's a good thing for competition, and it's a good thing for lower prices. So I'd be very wary about going down this route. I mean, this is just typical of this government. I think it's big spending, big government, and you know, Ronald Reagan had a line that you may remember, John. If it moves, you tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidise it. And that seems to be the attitude of this government.
Annabelle Crabb in Canberra, do you sense there's an appetite to extend the GST to the .com sector?
Look, extending the GST, I don't think there's an appetite for anywhere in government. I mean, we commissioned a root and branch tax review that specifically precluded even discussion of any sort of adjustment to the GST. I mean, it's kind of like a wake-in fright sort of proposition, and I suspect that's why you saw Bill Shorten changing his rhetoric on it so very quickly overnight from a, well, maybe we could consider this, to a, well, obviously we won't be considering this sort of thing. I mean, but you've got to have some sympathy for the Australian retailer, I think, because, you know, I could buy something online from, here's where I expose my knowledge about which Australian outlets, major outlets do online shopping, but I mean, you know, if I bought an item from a large Australian retail chain online and had it shipped to my door, then it's a kind of an analogous service to when I buy a book or an item from overseas, and I can go up to $1,000 without having to pay any tax. I mean, this is kind of an issue that we have to deal with. I must say that I have a bit of sympathy for the retailers here. Quickly to you, Jane, are you a big .com shopper?
No, not at all. My daughters make up for my lack of presence there. And they use my credit card quite often. So perhaps I am in a weird kind of a way. But it just does fascinate me. Every time, business, bloody business. You know, sorry, when things are going well, you say, government, keep out. The minute it gets tough, government, help us, please. No, just, you know, put up with it. If things go up, things go down, that's life in business. I'm in business.
Now, Jane, I want to get your thoughts on this debate that's going on in New South Wales right now. There was the introduction from the state government of ethics classes as an alternative to scripture classes. If parents didn't want their kids going to scripture, currently you don't have to go if you're not religiously minded, but you have to go sit in the library or play in the playground, play handball, something like that. But there's been some toing and froing about all of this, and it looks as though the incoming potentially Liberal government next year is going to scrap it. What's your take on it?
Oh, it's outrageous. I mean, my kids sat around the hall and watched videos. I think they watched The Princess Bride and things like that 100 times over rather than going to scripture. And it is outrageous that anyone should try to prevent them from experiencing something else of value. And I would have thought, not being a religious person myself, that ethics and morality were an integral part of scripture. So when they talk about scripture not including ethics, and therefore it's not fair to have ethics offered instead of scripture, I think, what's going on in scripture? What are you teaching them if it's not ethical? That kind of worries me. So, no, I think it's outrageous, and I'm sorry, but I was actually considering voting Liberal in the state election. No, I won't after this.
Mac Williams, what's your view? Should it be an either-or, ethics or scripture? Should we make room for both in our kids' education?
I think it's either-or, frankly. I think that's what I went to a school where we could do either, and that seems to be the thing. Can I just comment on the previous one, on the tax?
Just quickly, yes.
If you follow that logic of taxing the online purchases, you start taxing people for taking holidays overseas.
That's right.
It's a good point. Tom Switzer, ethics at the same time as scripture. Surely it's up to the parents to decide what's in their kids' best interest.
There's no alternative to scripture or religious education, I don't think. Look, why has this been raised now? I don't understand why this has become a burning issue. I suspect it's just a desperate attack by the Labor government to find a way of wedging the New South Wales Liberal
It's been a burning
Party.
issue for years. We just finally got government to pay attention.
Is it going to lose votes for the Liberal Party ahead of next year's election in New South
very
Wales?
much. No. I think the Liberal Party is home and hose in the next election. I think nothing can save the Labor Party even these kind of tactics.
Finally to you, Annabelle Crabb, quick final word, either or on ethics and scripture?
Well, I think that, they're lucky that the voting age is where it is, because if you gave the kids a vote, I bet they'd vote for movies.
Not the Princess Bride 100 times over.
Well, thank you very much indeed to our panellists tonight, Tom Switzer, Jane Curra, Mac Williams and in Canberra, Annabelle Crabb. That's all for The Drum for tonight. You can check us out on the website abc.net.au/The Drum. I'm John Barron. See you next time.